Hi folks, thanks for coming. We really appreciate the turnout and you driving up. I want to thank our hosts for the Nature Center and letting us have this space. It's perfect. So this is Jessica West, and she is a human wildlife conflict specialist. She's a biologist with Fish and Wildlife, State of California Fish and Wildlife. So she's here to answer any questions that you have. So we really want you to ask the questions, the difficult questions, or the questions that you had in your mind that you haven't had answers to. So please feel free to ask her questions once she's finished with her presentation, and she'll let you know when to ask. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. How are we doing this afternoon? Excellent. Yeah, seriously, again, thank you so much to the Nature Center, the City of Burbank as well, for sponsoring, hosting this event. I really appreciate this opportunity to connect with folks. I think we all know why we're here today. We've had some bear activity here in the Verdugos, which is kind of new for a lot of folks. And so what I'm hoping to do today is first introduce a little bit about just some bear biology, bear behavior. We can get into a little bit about how we as the Department of Fish and Wildlife actually manage bears or respond to what we would call conflict bears. And then getting into the meat and potatoes as far as how do we actually prevent conflicts, right? We know they're here, you know, what can we do basically as community members to try to discourage or otherwise prevent this level of conflict that we might be seeing. So again, thanks everybody for being here. If you don't mind, I do have my laptop here. I'm just using it for notes, so I'm just going to be following along a little bit. I promise I'll be looking up at everybody here, but just to make sure I'm staying on track and providing the information that I really wanted to today. And as Stacy mentioned, I'm thinking probably questions at the end. That's a huge part of what I really want to do today, is hear from you folks, hear your questions, have a discussion about the bears as well. So I'll try to keep my presentation short, and then hopefully we can have those the Q&A basically at the end. So. And before I get started, I did just want to make the following acknowledgement that, you know, we as the Department of Fish and Wildlife, we do recognize that human-wildlife conflict is complex, it's complicated, it's contextual to say the least. Attitudes, values, perception, tolerance of wildlife is going to vary widely. And we do also understand that community knowledge, identities, traditions, these are all interconnected with our natural resources. And so part of what I actually am for the department, as Stacy mentioned, I am a human wildlife conflict specialist. Kind of a mouthful, but essentially the Department of Fish and Wildlife recognized that statewide we are seeing an increase in wildlife activity and conflicts all over the state. And so we actually then, as conflict specialists, came on board January of 2022. So it's a brand new program, our Human Wildlife Conflicts Program. But essentially, the idea behind this program is to start, one, raising awareness of wildlife, actually connecting with communities, which is why I was hired, to provide information, go out and do site visits. We also provide technical advice. But on top of that, we are now starting to implement some of these non-lethal aversive conditioning methods. So what in the world is that? Basically, my job as a conflict specialist is to, one, learn about these animals, right? Not even just our bears, but also our mountain lions, coyotes, bobcats, learn a bit more about how they're actually using the landscape, and then we as the biologists can actually go in, place GPS collars or ear tags on these animals to see their movements, right? We want to know, how are they actually using these residential areas? Are they just visiting at night? Are they coming only during the day? Are they also using natural space adjacent to the residential areas? So these are all questions that we're really trying to learn about, for these specific animals. And then, because we have these collars, we then can do that conditioning, that aversive conditioning. So we as conflict specialists can go out and haze these animals and try to see, is there some way to now reverse the behavior that we're seeing? So that's kind of just a quick lowdown of the conflicts program, why I'm here. But also, I did want to mention too, some folks are probably familiar with Fish and Game. That's probably more at the top of folks' minds. We are the same agency. We actually changed our name back in 2013 to better represent the fact that we're not only just representing game species, but actually all wildlife in California. I should say most wildlife in California. But we are a regulatory conservation-based agency. We are a state agency, and we are tasked with protecting, maintaining healthy wildlife populations so that we can oversee that recreational, commercial, scientific use as well. And we also happen to be that lead agency charged with human-wildlife conflict response. So that's just a little bit about me, who I am with the department, and our role now as the department trying to address these conflicts. Maybe let's talk a little bit now about bear biology. So just some basic bear info here. Typically bears are black bears. That is the only species that we have here in California. The name is a little bit deceiving, however. When you see a black bear, most of the black bears here in Southern California especially are not black. They are brown. So some folks will say, well, no, it had to have been a brown bear or a grizzly bear. But we actually no longer have our grizzly bears. That is our state mascot. They were extirpated in the, I don't want to give you the wrong info here. A long time ago, actually about 100 years now we're looking at is when they were removed from the state. So again, we only have American black bears here. It's our only species in California. But their typical habitat is going to be mountainous. It's usually about areas that are above 3,000 feet elevation. Adult weight is going to vary quite a bit depending on gender and age, but male bears around here, they're going to top out at about 150, 350 pounds. So again, kind of a big range. Females are going to be a little smaller, usually about 100 to 200 pounds. Their home range size, now this is something that varies quite a bit as well. It really depends again on the resources available, the age of the bear, gender as well, but most black bears are going to have a home range size of about 60 to 150 square miles. Now here in the Verdugo Mountains, we did the math this morning, we figured out it's about 24 square miles, definitely a lot smaller. However, we have found that some of our bears in our Angeles National Forest foothill community, so anything basically north of the 210, some of those bears, their home ranges are actually only about 3 to 11 square miles. So much smaller, right? And again, it really is about those resources. They're finding those resources in these residential areas, and that's why they have such a smaller home range size. And diet, speaking of resources, so black bears, similar to us, they are omnivores, so they're going to be eating anything and everything. But primarily in the wild, they're going to be focusing a lot on vegetation and insects. That's their primary food sources. In the fall, it's going to be a lot of acorns. Believe it or not, they love our acorns. They are going to be eating a lot of grasses. They will take fruits, nuts. They'll actually take roots as well from certain plants. But they are primarily vegetarian with some insects. And then in the springtime, you do actually hear about them taking, this is kind of sad, but they will take fawns. That would probably be their the most meat at any one time that they're ever interested in or looking for. Basically, mama deer will actually leave her fawns in a sheltered location while she goes off and forages. And black bears with that amazing sense of smell, that can actually track down those babies. So kind of sad, but again, that is their primary animal protein when they're actually eating it. So they're really not very predatory by nature, our black bears, especially here in California. A question about hibernation that we usually get, right? So folks say, well, our bears are hibernating, we shouldn't have that much activity. As it would turn out, here in Southern California especially, a lot of our bears don't hibernate, at least not in the true sense of the word. If they do, it's going to be basically a period of torpor. They're just going to become a little bit less active, but you can actually expect to see bears year-round here in California. If they do, however, it's going to be about November to March, so there is that little time period where activity lessens. But if you are a female bear who is pregnant, you will then den up, or you will hibernate that year, because that's actually how they have their babies. Sounds nice, right, for all of our human moms out there who had to wait 9 months. These guys get to be half awake. The babies are super tiny. They're actually only gestating or inside of mom for a couple of months before they're born. And again, mom's basically completely out of it when she has her babies, so kind of perfect scenario. And then population estimates. So right now there is some new work underway trying to figure out, a baseline of how many black bears we actually have in California. Our current estimates, and these are pretty outdated, we're still, again, in the process, using some pretty rigorous science, using hair snare, hunter data as well, trying to figure out better estimates. But right now, we think there are about 30,000 to 40,000 bears in all of California. And lifespan for these guys is about 15 to 25 years old. So that's just some basic bear bio info. I did want to address something that comes up I think fairly often with bears when we think about them in Southern California. So, as of recent history, we could really only find black bears in the northernmost parts of California. However, we can currently find them now in pretty much every mountainous and foothill community in nearly all of California. So what changed? Why do we suddenly have black bears here in Southern California? They have a little bit of a complicated history here, and there is some back and forth as to whether or not we have all the accurate information. But essentially, black bears, they actually did appear in the fossil record here in Southern California about 1 million years ago. So black bears actually are native to Southern California. But again, this was about 1 million years ago. What happened was we then experienced this, what's considered a 2,000-year-long mega drought. When you go back in the paleontological history, you can actually see evidence of this. We used to have much more in the way of coniferous forests here in Southern California, but during this mega drought, basically all of those coniferous forests retreated to Northern California, our wetter areas of the state. And when that happened, so did the black bears. So they essentially followed the conifers. Of course, some of our forests now have returned here in Southern California, but black bears hadn't yet. They very likely would have on their own, but they were actually, there was a reintroduction effort in the 1930s that was between the Department of Fish and Wildlife, U.S. Forest Service, the National Park Service. So there actually were 28 bears that were moved from Yosemite and brought to both Angeles National Forest and Los Padres National Forest. So again, kind of complicated history. It's, again, very likely we would have seen them, return in time, but we sort of sped things up in the 1930s. So that's why we have them now, again, here in Southern California. So I just wanted to address that real fast. And then, when we think about bear habitat, like I said, they're definitely going to be focusing on coniferous, sort of oak woodlands as well. But sometimes, that boundary can get a little mixed, right? Because especially thinking about our foothill communities, wildlife don't recognize property lines or boundaries of what is human territory. We kind of grow up with this concept of bear country. I have this love-hate relationship with that word only because I think it kind of gives this false sense of, bears are here, humans are here. And again, they don't recognize that, because if you have those 4 basic requirements, for bears or other wildlife, which is our food, our water, our shelter, and other individuals of that species, you are very likely going to be attracting these animals here. And so we kind of joke then that human country often overlaps with bear country, if we're not necessarily addressing those attractants. It's not always a bad thing, it's not always a good thing either, but it's just something to consider, that terminology of bear country. Real fast, just kind of going into breeding as well. So they're going to be breeding actually right about now. This is when males and females are pairing up. And female bears, this is really amazing. It's essentially built-in bear birth control. They actually have what's called delayed implantation. Whoops, thank you. I knew that was going to happen. Appreciate it to get a rock or something. Delayed implantation. So essentially, a female is going to breed in the summertime, but those eggs actually will not implant in her uterus until fall. And this is all determined on her fat reserves. So if she, didn't get a lot of food that summer, it was kind of hard going, her body will actually say, hey, we shouldn't have these eggs implant. We can't afford to have cubs this year. But if she's doing very well, she's got really high fat reserves, then that's when we see those cubs being born. Again, they are born over winter, so very young, very premature. Usually January through February is when they're born. And then they're going to emerge in the springtime with mom. They're going to usually see about 2 on average cubs, which I know is what we saw here in the Verdugos. Sounds like we have at least 1 ear-tagged female that we're aware of who had 2 cubs, and we can get into that a little bit more later as well. But they're going to stick around with mom for about 1.5 to 2 years. And we did see this recently. One of those cubs that I mentioned, at least one, I'm not sure still whereabouts the other cub is, but one cub did leave mom and is independent now from mom. But so that's just a little bit about reproduction. I also wanted to briefly talk about senses. I mentioned bears have an incredible sense of smell, and it is so true. It's actually 100 times better than our own. It's about 10 times better than 7 times better than a bloodhound dog, which is what we typically think of as the world's best sniffers, right? But black bears, they have such an intricate nose, and I'm sure when we're all done, you can come and check out this skull here and actually look inside of the bear's nose. It's so intricate, just so many sensory organs in this nose, and that is how they are finding their way around the world. Again, 100 times better than ours. They're looking for food, and it's every day these bears wake up and say, where can I find food? Where's the nearest food? And it really is that sense of smell that's getting them there. Okay, let's see. So that was, again, just kind of a brief overview of some kind of basic bear biology. Let's get into now conflict bears, right? We call them conflict bears versus problem or nuisance bears, only because, we think it's important to consider that these are bears that are simply being bears, and while, of course, we need to mitigate these conflicts, we need to just sort of look at it holistically, and say that, yes, maybe there's something that we could be doing as a community, but obviously this bear's behavior needs to change as well, and so that's why we refer to them as conflict bears. But basically, any type of conflict bear you can consider a no harm, no foul bear. This is basically a bear that's wandered in somewhere. It's not necessarily looking for food. It's probably looking for food, not for confrontation. These are typically our younger juvenile bears that sort of wind up in the wrong place at the wrong time. And our usual response for these bears is, depending on location, either give them that space or that time that they need to leave the area, or even recommending hazing or scaring, which we'll talk about in a bit. And let's say, if a bear were to wander into downtown Burbank, right? I always use the example of downtown. Basically, somewhere where they don't have immediate access back to suitable habitat, that's when we as the department would then step in and then move that bear back to more suitable habitat. So just considering that. General nuisance is another type of conflict bear. So you can probably imagine what this is. These are bears that haven't necessarily caused any sort of property damage, but they are finding access to attractants. They might be hanging out in developed areas and residential communities. It kind of goes hand in hand with habituated as well. And we might be familiar with that word. Habituated, basically just meaning that the bears now have some level of comfort, to being around people or to human use areas, but kind of goes hand in hand. General nuisance, habituated. And usually our response as the department is then to, connect with property owners who are experiencing that level of conflict and saying, providing that technical information. Let's say doing a site visit. Let's say, is there something on your property that you think might be causing them to be there? Is there some way to either now remove that entirely or prevent access to it? So really just working with the community and trying to figure out ways to, reverse this sort of nuisance behavior that we're seeing. And then at that point, we also recommend deterrence and hazing as well. Now, a depredation bear, this is going to be kind of going again up that level. Basically, this is a bear that's now threatening to, damaging, or actually destroying property. Property could be anything from a chicken coop, a beehive, a crawl space, which we do see pretty commonly with our bears that are seeking shelter under homes. They unfortunately have figured out, a lot of these bears, that that's a good place to go in the heat of the day or when it's cold out as well. At that point in time, we still are recommending just trying to remove those attractants as much as possible, preventing access. But at that point in time, and I did just want to mention this just so folks are aware, we as the department, we actually are able to provide what's called a lethal depredation permit. Basically, that means a property owner has requested this permit for them to actually take the bear. It would be the property owner, not us as the department. But this can be issued to a property owner, but only if that property damage has been verified, right? So we would actually come out, do a site visit, confirm, yes, this was a bear that caused this damage. Only if all other non-lethal options have been exhausted, and then also considering local firearms ordinances, right? Because obviously, we wouldn't necessarily be able to issue a permit to someone who lives, in the middle of Pasadena, right? Because now you're in a residential area, and that's why it's important to consider all angles when we're talking about depredation. And again, really trying to avoid that from happening as best as possible from the get-go before it gets to that level. And then the last kind of conflict bear, this would be what we call our public safety bears. I did want to preface that only law enforcement personnel can actually make that determination of a public safety bear, or what's known as imminent threat. So imminent threat in this case means this is a bear that has exhibited one or more aggressive behaviors directed towards a person. And this, again, could be a bear that's made physical contact with a human, or it's exhibiting some kind of immediate threat to public health and safety. So like I mentioned, only law enforcement can make that determination, and I am not law enforcement. I'm just a biologist with the department. But we do work really closely with our law enforcement division. That's why if we as the biologists are getting these reports of bears that are perceived as acting aggressively, we then will bring that up to law enforcement. We work really closely with them to keep them in the loop of what's going on in particular areas. But all that being said, I do think it's important to consider that people live and recreate in bear habitat every day without incident. Yeah, it's just something to consider. I would be remiss if I did not mention, of course, I'm sure folks are aware of the recent incident that occurred in Arizona. We're still waiting, of course, for all the details for that. It does sound like it was an unprovoked attack, and obviously that's not with my state agency, so I don't have all the details. There was. Yeah, it was. And of course, I want to make it clear that our hearts, of course, go out to that family, to that person, everybody who's now struggling with this really rare incident. But like I say, we think there are about 700 to 800,000 black bears across all of North America. Fewer than one person is actually fatally injured by a black bear every year, which I know obviously these are people, not statistics. We take that seriously, but just kind of looking at things from that perspective, recognizing that these are incredibly rare incidents. And yeah, I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that and we can definitely answer any questions about that as well as best as I can during the Q&A. And so those are our types of conflict bears. I wanted to just kind of touch on relocation, translocation as well. Kind of two very similar words, but actually two very different meanings. That's probably one of the most common questions, right? Is can we relocate the bear? It's causing issues. Is it now possible to put it back, in the wild? I'm saying in quotes only because this is, oftentimes how it's relayed to us. And I totally get it. It sounds like a really excellent, feasible option. But the unfortunate reality is we have since realized now through research, by placing GPS collars on bears, by following their movements, ear tagging them, we've found that bears can quite literally travel hundreds of miles trying to get back to their former locations. Quite literally, you can see the data, they go exactly to where they were moved from. Obviously, this isn't always the case. Sometimes it does work, but 9 out of 10 times it's relatively ineffective in that way. It's also essentially sort of moving the conflict elsewhere, sort of kicking the can down the line. It's moving this bear now into a different community. It opens up space for another animal to take its place. There's the potential to spread disease anytime you're moving a bear or other animal into a different area. And oftentimes, we already are located within or very close to suitable habitat. So really, it's about trying to address the root of the problem, right? Recognizing that, this is likely not going to be the only bear that we have in our community. And now it's about saying, okay, if we do have more, we need to address it holistically, from that approach. So,
well, Jessica, I think the point that you mentioned is exactly what we're here about, to talk about relocating these bears.
Sure.
Because you yourself said that we're living in the Verdugo Hills. Mm-hmm. We're surrounded by the 2 freeway, the 210, and the 5. Mm-hmm. There's never ever been bears here because we're not butted up against the Angeles Forest. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it seems only logical that if you remove them now, they won't settle into this area. The longer you leave them here, the more they're going to be more comfortable.
No, I appreciate that. And I guess maybe I can just address that now, and then we can sort of move on to deterrence and hazing and that sort of thing. So actually, to your point, we did have a bear that was here in 2011. Mm-hmm. So we do know that, they do come in from time to time. Something I wanted to mention too is that, we really don't know a lot about these bears that have shown up in the Verdugos. We don't even know how many there are. We have an idea, but we really don't know how they're using the landscape, how they're actually even getting here. And I know one of the points I had stressed with you previously too, and with the rest of the community is, we can't prevent more bears from coming in or from leaving for that matter. There's so many unanswered questions, and that's really what we're trying to do now as the department. We did actually capture one of those bears. So we do have a bear with a collar, a GPS collar now in the Verdugos. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. So we actually we're in this process now.
Know it's here.
Right. No, we do know that.
Yes. I mean,
absolutely. No. I understand. But having that collar, that's going to now tell us how are they using this landscape, right? I totally recognize they're in the communities. We need to know how often are they there. We need these answers first so that we can make those informed management decisions. And one thing also I wanted to mention too, even though this is, like you said, it's fragmented habitat, right? We are south of the 210, west of the 2, it is boxed in. It's 24 square miles. This is all really new for us. We don't, having a few bears here doesn't necessarily mean that now we have a population. It's very possible that bears are sort of finding their way in, and they could leave in time. Having a few individuals does not equal a population. And we're gonna find out now with this young bear who actually was born here, right? We have reason to think that this is her kind of home turf. Like, this is all she's ever known. And so we don't know, is she gonna try to leave? Is she gonna stick around? But we need those answers to make those informed decisions. But to your point about it being fragmented habitat, even fragmented habitat is still habitat. There are still things here to support them, but we also recognize, right, there is going to be what's called a carrying capacity. We know, or at least we think, right, just kind of based off the current information, likely we could only really sustain a healthy bear population. And again, I'm using that term loosely because we don't really think we have one right now, but we know that a small area like this probably would not be able to sustain that many bears. And so I just wanted to make it known that, while it's not currently on the table as far as, translocation, which would be moving a bear outside of its home range, its assumed home range, it's not off the table. We're talking about these things. We're trying to gather all of this information so that we can figure out what is the best course of action for the bears and for the people as well. So hopefully that kind of goes.
There's a possibility if these cubs get larger, they would go elsewhere. Or are they going to stay here because they got good eatings? Right.
No, and that's exactly what we want to find out. No, you're totally right, because this might be the first time, right, at least in our recorded history, that we've had cubs, and we don't know. We don't know if they're going to try to cross. We don't even know where they're coming from, too. So that would be really important information to know. Is there somewhere under the 210? Is there somewhere under the 2? Because we know they move around, but we don't know exactly how they're getting here. So
how many bears are here that you know of?
That we know of, at least 3. But to be fair, we actually don't even know if they're still in the Verdugos. We know of at least one tagged bear who will actually cross underneath the 2 as well. So we know we have bears that will sometimes be in Glendale, La Crescenta. So at any one given time, we really don't know, at this point. But that's kind of the current estimate right now is potentially 3.
And those are not related?
We do think they're related, actually.
So
yeah.
Mom and 2 cubs?
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And that's because we actually were able to see some wildlife camera footage that, and of course, obviously from our communities too, just providing that information. So we do think they are related to that other ear-tagged bear. So lots of questions to be answered. I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is we need these informations. Oh, let's go ahead and look at it after, if you don't mind. Yes, no, thank you. I appreciate it. No, thank you. I'm sure I'd love to hear folks' stories as well too after Q&A. So, but okay, so hopefully that answers that for right now. We can continue discussing that, but just sort of moving into conflict prevention. So I really do appreciate this discussion. Thank you. So in a lot of ways, I think human-wildlife conflict can almost be viewed like in heart disease, right? We know that we need to eat healthy, we need to exercise to prevent issues with our heart as best as we can. And in a lot of ways, human-wildlife conflict is similar, right? We know we need to take steps now, not even just with bears, but coyotes, mountain lions, even bobcats, deer. There are steps that we can take right now. Some are bigger, some are smaller, but it's taking those steps and trying to figure out what's going to work for each community and each individual animal. And first and foremost, when it comes to preventing conflict, can't stress it enough, make sure we're never feeding wildlife, whether that is intentionally or unintentionally, because unfortunately what happens is we then, we lose that forgetting my word here, but that barrier essentially, that understanding of, humans are a risk, versus humans sometimes give me sandwiches. It's a very different message we're sending to the wildlife. So it's really important that we're not feeding wildlife as much as possible. It's also against the law. So California Code and Regs, Title 14, Section 251 goes into that quite a bit of detail as far as not feeding big game mammals. So bears are considered game or hunted animals here in California. And even some cities, have prohibitions against that as well. So it's serious. There's a reason that we say, please don't feed the wildlife. And the main consequence of this, again, is that concept of what we call food conditioning. So essentially, this is an animal that has now learned to associate people, human activities, human use areas, or even things like storage receptacles, aka trash cans or outdoor refrigerators. If they just get one food reward, for some of these bears, that means, hey, I'm gonna look for these from now on. I got a big food reward the last time I looked in this outdoor fridge. There was ice cream, there was everything. And they are so smart, they are going to then hone in on these things. So food conditioning, that's where we start to see these kinds of conflicts really with bears. And the problem with this is, right, it's going to increase what we call proximity tolerance, right? Bears are now going to start to lose that, what we say, fear of people. They may start approaching people. Someone, again, I'm using the sandwich as an example, but it's possible someone said, hey, how cute, fed the bear a sandwich. Bear said, oh, that was interesting. Maybe I'll start approaching more people and maybe I'll get more sandwiches. And if bear doesn't get a sandwich, bear might respond by saying, hey, last time I walked up to someone, I got a sandwich, and then just sort of tapping on a leg, just trying to sort of encourage. So that's that proximity tolerance, that risky behavior is going to increase potentially, and just general in conflict, right? It's going to increase when they start to associate us with food. And I did want to mention too, I know we kind of already gave some statistics as far as, fatal injuries, but bites, scratches on humans as a result of bears, they are most commonly associated with bears that were actively getting handouts, getting food from people. So just wanted to mention that as well.
So let's see, but the good news is, right, as we've already mentioned, food's a big driver for these guys. But we as people, as community members, can do a lot right now, to try to prevent this from happening. One of those is deterrence, right? So deterrence, these are going to be objects, devices, methods, all things that are hopefully going to dissuade wildlife from interacting with certain areas, with people, plants, or other animals.
But really, these are going to be our sensory items, or items that discourage wildlife behavior. Thank you, Scrub Jays. Discourage that kind of behavior, right? Through sight, sound, smell, touch, what have you. So this can include things like bear spray, which I'm happy to talk about bear spray as well if we have questions. Things like whistles, things like air horns, things like motion-activated lights and sound deterrence as well. There is so many options out there, and we could definitely kind of touch on, particular ones if folks have questions. But these are all examples of deterrence, right? And then I did want to note, of course, with deterrence, it's not going to be, the save-all solution, right? I will have to mention that no deterrent is going to be 100% effective 100% of the time. That's why, though, we do recommend trying out different deterrents. Use them consistently over time. Every animal is an individual, just like us. Some bears and other wildlife are going to have a higher tolerance for certain things. It also kind of depends on age, too. Thinking about coyotes specifically, sometimes when young coyotes are hazed, it might be the first time in their life they've ever had anybody yelling, raising their arms, making a big commotion in front of them, and their first instinct is to stop and assess. They're going, I don't want to turn my back to that. That's terrifying. But folks might interpret that as, the hazing didn't work or it's not working. But that's why we say just keep up with it. It really is going to depend on the individual. Not every individual is going to respond to hazing. We also recognize that as well. And of course, just considering local city and county ordinances, right? Before we implement these things, one of the things we often recommend is electric fencing, which I know some cities, there are concerns for fire risk. So it's, some cities will allow it, some will not. I will say though that most of the newer technology, making the wires for these are actually fire safe, or I should say won't start a fire. So it really kind of depends on the materials, right? But what I'm getting at is, make sure in advance before we're setting up, some of these deterrents that you actually can use them in these areas. And then I've mentioned the word hazing several times now. This is basically just scaring. And we kind of joke that scaring is caring, and it's true, for bears and other wildlife. And this is that idea that we're using those deterrents, right? We're using ourselves as people. It's a technique where we're using deterrents to try to modify or otherwise halt that behavior that we're seeing. And really the idea is to teach that animal, right? Or re-educate them, if you will, that what they're doing is not going to be tolerated. Sometimes that hazing needs to go a step up, right? Maybe it's not just air horns or whistles or yelling that's going to do it anymore. Maybe we now need physical deterrence, which is when we as the department can step in, as well as city animal control. So we've actually begun a hazing regiment now with this collared bear in the Verdugo. So we're actually using our paintball guns, and we're using that physical deterrent. So trying to step it up a bit and really trying to, again, discourage that behavior, trying to re-educate these bears. It's all very new. There's still a lot of research that needs to go into this and how effective it is, but that's something that we're really interested in trying, and especially here in the Verdugos, recognizing that this is a really interesting situation, having bears in this specific area.
Is it okay for the homeowners to use paintball guns?
Thank you for asking that. We would only recommend that trained individuals like ourselves are going to be using those. But no, thank you for asking. That is definitely something to mention. That would be for folks, right, who actually have that training and that situational awareness, because even what you'd call a non-lethal projectile still has the potential to become lethal if it hits in just the right place or just the right angle. So thank you. Yes, that would be left for professionals.
What about to protect my wife?
Well, sure. No, absolutely. And so we'd recommend things like rocks, even just small, like tennis balls even, just small projectiles that won't necessarily hurt the bear, but, can still at least create that physical sort of feeling for the bear.
Stockpile rocks all around our home?
You certainly could if that was an option you wanted to try out. Yeah, definitely.
If a bear does wander into your property, what is the likelihood of one of these people being attacked?
I would say with all wildlife, of course there's never zero risk.
I get that.
But honestly, with black bears, highly, highly, highly unlikely. Again, just looking at those statistics and recognizing how many bears there are throughout even just California and not having these incidents occur. Black bears by nature are really non-confrontational. They have, they are from forests. Their response to danger is either get the heck away or climb up a tree, which is going to be very different from grizzly bears, right? We often think about grizzlies when we think about bear attacks and incidents, but grizzly bears, they are from the open plains. They grew up. They're from areas where there is no cover. They have to stand and defend themselves. But black bears didn't. They grew up in these forests, and that's why that typical response is get the heck away from the person. So hopefully that answers that. And then almost done. I'm just wrapping up a few just sort of particular technical advice or information for backyards, for your home in general. And then we'll kind of go over real fast what to do if you see a bear, and then we'll open it up for questions. But in the backyard and garden, right? So this is kind of ground zero for a lot of bear activity and conflict. If you have fruit trees or compost, making sure that we're harvesting that ripe fruit or vegetables, we're picking up that rotting fruit off the ground, securing trees and gardens with electric fencing. Again, something you'd have to look into, see if that's an option for you. But electric fencing is a really, really effective solution when it's installed correctly and maintained. Not even just for gardens, but also chicken coops, beehives as well. So a really, really amazing deterrent. Barbecues. We often hear about bears being interested in barbecues. That is true. That's why we do recommend sanitizing, cleaning them regularly. If you have pools or hot tubs, making sure we're putting some sturdy covers on top of those as well, just to try to prevent the bear from wanting to be in the pool itself. I know we did have a case of a bear that actually did tear up a jacuzzi cover. And I'm sorry, I'm laughing. Obviously that's not funny, but it's, no, I know. No, of course not. And I guess all I could say to that, just thinking about, we make that recommendation of putting covers on. Bears, they are curious. Sometimes they will be interested in objects like that. And so I'm very sorry to hear that happened to you, but that's, potentially what was happening. It was some level of interest, but I just wanted to mention that because I know I had heard about that in your community as far as hot tub covers. Bird feeders as well. Believe it or not, bird feeders, we often call them bear feeders. Even things like hummingbird nectar, bird seed, these are really high dense, high caloric foods that these bears are completely drawn to. I've seen firsthand a bear taking a hummingbird nectar and just downing it like it was a soft drink. That's just, it's really, these bears are looking for the most bang for their buck, as far as calories are concerned. It's a lot easier to get all of the calories you need in one day from a bag of chips, and a lot faster than it would be to be eating, berries out in the woods. And so that's why our human food is such an attractant for these guys. But that's just sort of some backyard trash, of course. I would be remiss not to mention. Certainly we wouldn't say that, every person has to get a bear-resistant trash can. We know that's not necessarily feasible. They can be pricey. They are an excellent purchase in the long run, though, I will say. Especially those that are correct, right? We know that some have been retrofitted, which is awesome, but it's only bear resistant until it isn't. So really trying to use those actual certified bear resistant trash canisters that have actually been tested by grizzly bears. There's a place in Montana that does this and will give a certification to these receptacles. Those are awesome. So definitely something to look at. But in the meantime, kind of the short-term solutions would include things like storing your cans inside your garage or some kind of fully enclosed shelter structure, and making sure that we're placing those cans on the street the morning of pickup only. Just because, again, if it's sitting out overnight, that just gives that bear that opportunity then overnight, to then take part in what's the contents. And then cleaning those cans frequently as well, just because, again, so scent driven, these guys. So just trying to keep the scent down is also a great idea. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice a little. As far as things like barnyard animals, right? So things like chickens, I already mentioned a little bit, beehives, but even things like koi ponds. Definitely these are attractants as well for our bears. So our recommendation is night penning, these animals in completely enclosed shelter structures. Like I said, bears can be active at any time of day, but it is typically going to be nighttime that we hear about bears, seeking those kinds of deterrents when people aren't around. Again, they're not very predatory by nature, black bears, but they will certainly take advantage of chickens and beehives and koi, if they are out on the landscape. So again, electric fencing, making sure those structures have a roof, walls. Feed as well, that's a big one too, just making sure all of our animal feed is being stored inside. And for koi ponds, definitely some kind of a deep pond with hiding structures is another really great way to try to prevent that predation on your fish. And then, last but not least, around the home, I mentioned crawl spaces, right, can be a pretty big attractant for bears. Making sure we're doing our best to securely close them under homes, porches, decks. It's one of those things, we don't think about it until it happens. We might not really think about what kind of cover is over our crawl space. And, I was really surprised to learn just how many older homes have crawl spaces in these areas with a lot of bear activity. And so now it is kind of looking back and saying, well, we have the crawl spaces, but maybe now it's time to start looking into some new infrastructure, new ways to securely close them, because basically if that bear is able to get just one claw, in or around some kind of opening, it can still very easily open it. So it has to be completely flush with the wall. We have a whole list of recommendations as well as far as crawl space covers. If anybody wants to connect with me after, I can provide that. Again, installing motion activated strobe lights, alarms, physical deterrents. I do mention strobe lights only because a lot of folks, will get videos of not even just bears, but mountain lions that are walking past a home and a light will come on, and it doesn't seem like the animal is deterred by that. And that makes sense in a way, right? If these are animals that are sort of, hanging out in and around residential areas, they might not have any sort of negative association with a light that comes on. But a strobing light, that has much more potential to be frightening. That's really not something they would encounter very often in the wild. So just kind of thinking about, what kinds of lights we have is important, just going forward. Keeping dogs on leash leash is another big one. I know there are definitely concerns I've heard from folks about dogs being in backyards. And again, bears really are non-confrontational, even with dogs. They are going to try to get away from your dog. It's really only if, that dog is chasing the bear, is cornering the bear. Just like any wild animal, they are going to try to defend themselves, but they're really not targeting our pets in that way. But of course, if you're in somewhere that has bear activity, keeping those dogs on leash just to make sure they're not able to chase the bear, and then just going out in the yard with them, if you need to let them out basically in the yard. Carrying a walking stick, a whistle, an air horn, a noisemaker. Again, I recognize deterrents. They're not all going to be effective for every individual, but it's definitely a tool in the tool belt. It's something just to have with you. So my very last slide is actually just human bear encounters, right? There's a lot of questions about what do we do if we see a bear? Do I run? Do I yell things at it? What in the world do I do? The first thing is you're going to want to stop and do not run, right? So this could, not too much for bears, but maybe more so for like mountain lions are more predatory species. As soon as you run, something clicks in their brain of, oh, it's running, maybe I should pursue. And so that's why we say, just stop. I know it's easier said than done. Don't panic. Just kind of assess what's going on. Is the bear basically heading down the same path that I am? Am I in the bear's way? Is the bear walking towards me? It's so many things obviously to be considering in the moment, but just remember the first thing is stop and assess. You're going to want to avoid cornering that animal, right? So make sure they have room to escape. And then at that point, you're going to want to back away slowly. You're going to face that animal and maintain eye contact. And it's just about speaking in a low voice, just kind of saying, hey, bear. Whoa, bear. Hey, I'm a person. Just kind of letting them know, hey, you're getting a little bit too close for my liking. At that point, either the bear is going to, continue past you if you've given it space. It's either going to turn around. That's going to be, 9 times out of 10. But if that bear continues approaching you, right? If it's looking, if its ears are kind of back, if it's getting low to the ground, if it's actively approaching you, this is now what would be considered a predatory bear. This is a bear that's getting quiet, it's getting close, and it's not backing down. When bears get scared, normally, they're going to do a lot of blustering. They're going to get real big and they're going to go and they clap their jaws. They are trying to look big. They're trying to get scary. They're basically trying to ask you, hey, I need some space. That's going to be your most common sort of vocalizations, behavior you would see from a bear at close proximity. And then it is just about backing up, getting out of that bear's way. But again, if they're approaching you, that's when you're going to want to stand your ground, make yourself look larger, yell, clap, throw things towards that animal. And then if, again, in that rare instance, you are actually physically attacked by the bear, you do want to fight back in those instances and not play dead. And again, I just want to reiterate, really giving them respect as well as other wildlife, that's really going to be your best bet in preventing these kinds of negative interactions. Just trying to give them that respect and space, and obviously not approaching them as well. And so my 3 big takeaways from today, and again, I'm really looking forward to your questions, but I know that's a lot of info, so if I could just send you away with anything, it's really about giving bears respect, right? It's not about fear. We don't want to encourage fear. It's about encouraging respect. They are a large animal. Obviously, they are capable, animals. But again, knowing the behavior of black bears, knowing that most bears are non-confrontational, they're really just looking for food and easy resources, it's given them that respect. They're intelligent, they're adaptable, and they will continue to share the landscape with humans. And taking action, right? So making those changes now to protect people, our property, and of course not providing food and water to any wildlife for that matter, and staying safe, right? So awareness is going to be that best prevention for human-wildlife conflict, which is awesome. You guys were here today. You guys are interested in bears, learning about bears, so I really appreciate you coming out. And with that, again, thank you so much to the city. Thank you to the Nature Center. And I have my contact information as well if anybody wants to get in touch with me after. But for now, I'm happy to take any questions. So thank you very much. Sorry, losing my voice.
Jessica, other than paintballs and putting ear tags on them, what the state gonna do to help us in this community that's been inundated by these bears? We go into our trash, where the mother has taught him, trash can day is your food day. Come down. I mean, we put the locks on the trash cans. Other than putting up electric fences or a fortress, what can we do to get these bears out of our neighborhood?
Yeah, no, I understand completely. Again, I recognize this is new. This is new for a lot of folks having this activity, this level. And I guess maybe, and I'm sorry if it's not necessarily the answer we're looking for, but it really is gathering this information now so that we can make those informed decisions. You know, we need to know more about how they're using the landscape, how they're actually interacting with people to make those informed decisions.
Well, I had it in my kitchen, the big mama bear, 3 feet away from me. It scared the heck out of me. It was too close. I have a fence around my property. Now what do I gotta do? Put up a moat and electric fences?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would think, basically it's taking those small steps again, right? Like, it sounds like, I know you and I have connected already. You're already doing a lot.
It doesn't respond to the air horns, the whistles. It doesn't respond to anything.
But it does respond to some yelling and some horn honking. I've seen that.
Yeah?
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm lucky for you, but for me to have that bear that close to me.
No, I do. I really do. I understand your concerns. I do. And we're happy to keep working with you. You know, please keep reporting to us too. Because again, the more info that we have, then we can make those determinations, right? If at any point this bear
Well, how
hasn't.
far do you have to go to come with a determination? We've been studying black bears for decades. We know their behavior. We know what they are in California. We need them out of our neighborhood.
I understand. No, I do.
And we can't get anybody to help us.
I understand. We are helping the best that we can right now in the capacity that we can, you know, trying to provide that information and that education while monitoring these bears. You're absolutely right. We've definitely been studying bears statewide for a while, but I would say there's always something new to learn.
And in this area in particular, it is going to be very location based, right?
We can say, or try to say, you know, bears in the Sierras act a certain way, right? But they might not here in Southern California. They might not here in the Verdugos.
So that's really what we're trying to do right now is get that information
to make those decisions.
Yeah, but these bears were actually really displaced by the Sayre fire, like 2018. That's when they started showing up.
Oh, okay.
Mom came first.
Okay.
You have then
Okay.
the mom and the dad, then the mom and the cubs, and now the cubs are splitting up. So they've really only been here like 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
They haven't been here that long. And
Okay.
The 2011 bear you saw, I remember that too when I was mountain riding.
Oh, really?
You know, but he wasn't down our street.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Sure.
You've seen our street. I mean, there's fruit trees. There's tons of food down there for them.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly.
I mean, he was in my pool. He was up in my mulberry tree. You know,
Yeah. No, I
he's
understand.
not gonna leave.
Right.
How long are we gonna,
Right.
how long are we waiting? Because I have really small kids. I have a 3-year-old and a 1-year-old, and trying to leave the house is.
Sure. No, I understand, and obviously I wouldn't be able to change anyone's minds necessarily about, you know, that level of fear. Again, I would just say that we, you know, if we felt like having bears in the Verdugos, there was an immediate safety risk, you know, and again, this is just our understanding of bear behavior, we would do, you know, that kind of action. You know, we would take that into consideration if we felt like these bears were an immediate risk, you know, but we haven't seen that level, you know, at this time, according to our policy. And our policy, by the way, is available online if anybody wants to read that. You know, that kind of goes into how we respond to certain levels of conflict, who responds, you know, and that's all mandated by the state, by the Fish and Game Commission. And we are actually just upholding that policy. So I understand.
Things you said about safety, like I can't tell my 3-year-old to like not walk toward the bear. Like I can't even get him to come inside the house.
No, I understand. No, and like I say, I know this is new for everybody. You know, we're trying to figure things out. And again, just kind of thinking about bear behavior, right? Like they are, I wouldn't expect a bear to approach a child. You know, that would be pretty rare. That would be a very rare thing to see.
What if my child runs up to it?
Right. Then actually, for the most part, based off other occurrences, you know, of kids and bears interacting, bears will usually book it the other direction. You know, and again, like I say, I of course, I can't say there's zero risk, you know, living with any animal, whether it's bears, mountain lions, coyotes. There's always some level of risk, you know, but it's also just understanding behavior and using that knowledge to try to, you know, take that and what we're hearing in the field, to make those management decisions.
But it's such a large animal. We've dealt with coyotes, we've dealt with cougars, raccoons, rattlesnakes, and we're all aware of that. This is a huge animal.
No, I understand, and I recognize there's that level of fear, but I guess all I can say is just as someone who's been working with bears for a long time, it's easy for me to say don't be afraid of the bears just because I worked with them and I know their behavior. But, like I say, if we felt like there was an immediate risk or concern for public safety, we would respond differently. So I'm sorry, that's kind of all I can really say to that. I don't know if there's anything else.
People in Arizona
but
get that.
And not everybody wants them out.
Yes. I mean, to my mind, a cougar is much more predatory than a bear from what I've been hearing. I've heard more about cougar attacks on people than I have on bear attacks on people.
Because they've never been in this area.
But they are all over the United States. There are bears, she said there are what, 400,000 to 600,000 bears in the United States, something like that?
In the United States, there's about 700,000 to 800,000 estimated.
And how many incidents have you heard about?
It's usually one, if fewer than one person a year.
Do you want to be that one person?
Yes, if necessary. No, I really don't. But I don't think we are likely to be. From what she's saying about bear behavior, it's highly unlikely that they will come after us. I think we have more danger from rattlesnakes and cougars than we do from the bears, from what they're saying.
Maybe before I understand, obviously, there's going to be different opinions. I gave that acknowledgement in the beginning of we completely recognize there's going to be totally different levels of tolerance, acceptance for wildlife, and it's true. You folks are showing that to us, and that's why we recognize, right, there's going to be those differences. And I really do appreciate this discussion and hearing from both sides, so thank you. You had your hand in the back. I'm sorry. I'll go with you first, and then we'll move on.
Okay, so an operation question.
Yeah.
From what I hear, I understand all sides. I am a resident. No matter, as a government entity, I think there is that, like, oh no, are you guys doing enough for us? I hear that. So when I think in my own mind, you're still the entity that knows more than I do. So no matter, even if I'm the one experiencing this and it's more pertinent to me, I don't know enough to even talk to myself. I'm going to rely on you to guide, to speak to the problem, because you do know more, hands down. So I kind of just want to say that out loud, because I feel like that you really are the authority that we need to be listening to.
I appreciate it, yeah.
I don't want to hold on to that. So with that, I had a question about, so you mentioned the bear phaser, or conflict bears. In your estimation, where is our bear?
Yeah.
We can say this is where we're at.
Yeah, that's a great question. So asking about, what level of conflict we're sort of viewing this bear. Right now, I would consider this bear probably a little bit more on the side of general nuisance with some habituation, right? And I totally recognize that some folks have had higher levels, it sounds like, of habituation, experiences with the bear. And just like people, bears are going to respond differently to different people. So I see kind of both sides of it is afraid of me, it's not afraid of me. But based on the behavior that we've seen in the field and the reports that we've gotten, a little bit more on the side of general nuisance, with a bear who's sort of becoming more food conditioned, right? It is a female, has learned now, these are areas to find food in, which is mostly the trash cans. And so now it's about trying to reverse that, either getting certified bear resistant trash cans, retrofitting ours so that they actually are resistant, and also trying to, us as the agencies, trying to haze, with that more intensive hazing strategy. So sorry, that was kind of a long-winded answer, but.
That's where we're at. We're at the intersection of working with you to backtrack her behavior.
Yeah.
We're at that level where it's becoming, it's on its way to being.
Yeah, I'd say that's a good way of looking at things, sure. Yeah. Okay, let's see.
Can you talk a little bit specifically about Mama and her cub? How dangerous it is?
Oh, I can talk, sure. Yeah, as far as just...
That's a situation that we have.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Mama and we got her cub, and they travel together. And if I come out the front door, or any of these people come out the front door, and they get between Mama and the cub, that is a very, very dangerous situation. Could you discuss some of our options in that situation?
Yeah, no, I sure can. I can. And actually, it might be kind of helpful to reframe it just a little bit regarding species. So you're absolutely right. For something like a grizzly bear, definitely, that is a high-risk situation, intervening between mom and cubs. However, though, with black bears, and certainly, of course, we don't recommend getting in between a mama bear and cubs of any species, but black bears, however, again, are primarily non-confrontational. They will actually send their babies up a tree, or they will have babies run off. You know, that is their first line of defense is get out of here, get my cubs out of here, or get them up a tree to safety. So again, obviously don't encourage trying to intervene between mom and cubs, but as far as that level of risk, it's actually quite low, especially compared to a grizzly bear. Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about the actual age of the cubs right now.
Yeah, certainly. So I've only actually seen one cub in person and gotten hands on one cub. It does seem to be about 1.5 years, which is the time frame in which they do leave mom. So the one bear that we're tracking right now with our GPS collar, we do think that she's dependent now. She's since left mom. And I'm not actually sure about the other cub. I have not seen that other cub in person or mom in person as well.
The cub is tagged.
The cub is tagged. That is the cub I'm referring to. Yes, and the yellow tag is mama, that we think. Obviously, we don't have DNA to back this up, but just kind of based on reports and images. So, cub is about 1.5 years old. Yep.
The green color is the mama?
No. So only the cub actually has a GPS collar right now.
And she didn't like it. I could tell.
She didn't like it?
No, when she was in my yard. And she was rolling around with the grass.
Oh, it does take a little getting used to, and maybe actually just to kind of speak to the collars real fast too. They do look really big, they look clunky, but actually the general rule is about no more than 3 to 5% of the animal's body weight, and they actually have gone down in size immensely now that the technology is improving. So they look big, they look cumbersome, but they can still live totally normal lives. It doesn't get in the way, and it's actually not very heavy, especially when you compare it to their body size. So. Yeah.
Somebody said if you approach them, don't look in eye to eye, but bring your head down. But what you suggest, to look in the eye?
Yes, yeah. So in those situations where a bear is, perceived as acting predatory, right? Literally approaching you, it's slinking, almost like a cat. Then you do want to get big, defensive, aggressive, I should say. You want to get big. Yes, look that animal in the eye. I am the dominant, Yeah, I know. And there's so much, kind of, I wouldn't say misinformation, but there's just a lot of advice out there as to what to do when you encounter bears. That's based off of our experience and the research that we have, seen is yes, look them in the eye, get big, get loud, show that bear, hey, you don't want to mess with me.
Because another friend in Montana said we shouldn't look in the eye.
Oh, that may have been a grizzly that they were talking about. Yeah, I know, and pardon the pun, but totally different beast. And don't get me wrong, grizzlies are amazing. They have their place, of course, in nature, but black bears, yeah, they're a little bit easier, I would say, to coexist with from that point of view. Yeah. Oh, let's see. Oh, you both had your hand up. Sorry. How about in the back first? Yeah, that's you.
Oh, that's
yes. Hi. Nice to see you again. Yeah.
I'd like you to speak a little bit to the issue of the trash cans. And you've mentioned several times the certified.
Yeah.
Now, will the City of Burbank trucks be able to pick up those trash cans?
She's looking at me. No, I can definitely. Go ahead. Yeah, if you want to go ahead and say something first.
Yeah, we can look into it. We'll talk to them.
Yeah.
Just, I'll give you my card before we leave.
All right.
We can contact them.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, and thank you. I appreciate that. But
Can you help some more of us?
Oh yeah, it would be all of us we put all we would talk to them about.
Okay.
Oh, you were the animal. Okay.
Thank you. No, and I just wanted to thank the city too. I Actually, when I visited Country Club Drive,
and I found out that folks had bear-resistant cans that had been retrofitted by the city, I went, oh my God, I actually truthfully haven't heard of a lot of other cities doing that. That being said, I applaud it so much. I think that's great, the initiative, but we have since learned, right, that the locking mechanisms, unfortunately, we're not up to snuff for these bears. They're what's known as automatic trash cans, and basically what that means is once the trash truck actually lifts up the can, and this motion of dunking in, the lid will open, but then once it gets set back down on the ground, the lid will close and it should lock. But unfortunately, this particular design, I'm not an engineer, I don't know all the specifics, the bear figured out, well, all I need to do is just lift the trash can up. And now the lid, unfortunately, came open. They are so smart, that's what I'm saying. They're only bear resistant until they're not. And so the certified ones have been tested by Grizzlies. They have a whole list of automatic trash cans that are bear resistant, and they update it all the time too, because sometimes even the ones that get certified, they say, well, a bear got into it here, and now we have to reevaluate things. So yeah, question.
Is there a way, working with their sense of smell, that we can make the trash cans less attractive besides just cleaning them?
Yeah, thank you. No, exactly. The question, yes, was about making the trash can itself, or really even crawl spaces, certain areas. So yes, ammonia, pine salt, those are deterrents, scent deterrents that are used for bears, with of course the caveat of not every bear is going to respond the same way. It's something that would have to be reapplied too if you were going to keep spraying it, just because it evaporates so quickly. But I always say just give it a go, see if it works for you.
Jessica, I have a box in different areas around the house. But you can get the fake pine salt, you can get it at the 99-cent store. We've got like 12 of them. Pour that, add half water once it evaporates. That's onto the crawl space that we have completely.
And that looked great.
Like a cave.
It looked great.
And I have that in different areas. The ammonia is, a little more toxic for us.
It's smelly.
I was actually asking because people who weren't at the meeting the other day might not have thought about or known about the ammonia.
Definitely. So spraying is great, reapplying it. Sometimes we'll suggest too, even taking like a sponge and placing that in a litlittle Tupperware and then just kind of re-pouring it on here and there. But yes, just the understanding of, this might work right now, it might not for other bears or in the future, but give it a go. And that's really what deterrents are all about. There just hasn't been a lot of research into them, like really robust, yes, these are effective, these are not. And so it is still kind of this learning process now of what actually works depending on the species and individual. So, question.
Since you call it the bear, do you know where it is currently or most recently?
I do, yes. I wouldn't be able to disclose. No, I'm sorry. I know, and that's
the neighborhood, or is it?
I wouldn't be able to disclose it. What I can say though, well, so it's going to be initially for us, just as the managers trying to figure out where's this bear's home range, and then, but what's great though, knowing that the bear is hanging out in certain communities, we then can actually go out in those communities and connect with folks and say, hey, you've had some bear activity. We saw that with our caller. I will say,
I'm so curious, isn't it the right of the neighbors to know where their taxpayer gone? Locate this animal?
No, I appreciate that, and it's more about the scientific integrity of just trying to protect the individual bear as well. I totally get where you're coming from. I think that's a great idea, even if it was data that was given, maybe days after, just so that it wasn't, like the bear is here right now, just to try to protect that bear from someone messing with the bear. But those are things that we can talk about for sure. I know actually Yosemite National Park did that, where they will give out their GPS data, but usually it's about like a week after, and it's just about trying to make sure that the bear stays safe. People aren't trying to then approach the animals in the field. It's the scientific integrity of just trying to protect them. But something to make it a little more obvious. And I totally get where you're coming from. I might quote our partners at the National Park Service for their response for that level of providing that info. Jeff Sikich with the Santa Monica Mountains, wonderful guy who's been doing all that work with the mountain lions there. He said, what necessarily would you do if we provided that collar data? Because some of those things that you might change right then and there, those should be steps that maybe we should be taking now, recognizing that not And in his case, not every mountain lion is collared, knowing there could always be another lion in the area. So that's kind of their argument. I always kind of paraphrase what they said, and I think there was something to resonate with that. But I totally get where you're coming from. It would be cool if the technology allowed for it. But we actually too, it could be days sometimes. It's not real time all the time for us. We're not getting, every hour, depending on where the bear is. Sometimes if they're in a canyon, then the satellite won't even transmit and we won't know where they are for days, So unfortunately that technology is just not there yet to have the kind of real-time data that we could potentially provide. But yeah, the cowbells, just a warning system.
Yeah. Yeah, one question.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
If you had to use the bear spray on the bear, self-defense, what is the bear gonna do? Is it gonna be able to walk the area it's in, or is it gonna be confused? Or?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So yeah, talking about bear spray. And I think I had prefaced before too, just with bear spray, make sure you know how to use it beforehand, just because there is going to be some level of kickback potentially. So situational awareness is also going to be key, right? So obviously if the bear is standing in your doorway, maybe best not to use it inside. It's going to be really situational. But to sort of answer your question, what's the bear going to do? The bear should run. The bear should be able to run as long as there's still some kind of escape route. You're not cornering the bear, you're not backing it into a corner and then spraying it. The idea is really to make that bear say, whoa, I don't want to be here at all. That was terrifying, my nose hurts, I'm getting the heck out of here, which is what we would see for black bears. But hopefully that kind of answers your question.
You have to be extremely careful with the bear sprays. It's very powerful. We have one. I probably will never use it because I'm too, because if that comes back into your lungs, you will wind up in the hospital. It's really, really serious.
Is it tear gas?
Not quite.
It's so much
Correct.
bigger than what even our police officers use. So really, if anyone is going to think about it, watch a video or two. Or experiment, but it is really powerful.
It is.
You really have to be in a very threatening moment.
Yeah, and I will say it is an excellent tool though. Yes, as you're saying, it's one of those things, like just know how to use it in advance, but it is such an effective tool at preventing physical confrontations with bears. That's why, even in places like Montana, it's like you have to carry it, for your own safety. And again, those are grizzlies, a little different. But for me, I carry it. I understand black bear behavior. I've worked with black bears in the field and in person, and I know that my risk is low as far as having that kind of interaction. But in my mind, why give the bear that option, right? Like if you have something that can deter the bear and it is, there was a great study about it. It was like 99.8% of incidents where bear spray was deployed, there was no physical contact, so it's an excellent tool. But yes, it comes with the side effects you have to be aware of. So
Don't think about tasing them. That doesn't work.
yeah, tasing, yeah. The noise I've heard, actually, some police officers have used tasers, and even the noise has deterred some bears, but again, will depend on the bear. But yeah. Could I? I'm so sorry. There was one other question. Yeah, please. And then we'll go right to you.
Rapid fire.
Yeah.
She's 1.5. When can she start reproducing? Can she reproduce with her brother?
Oh, yeah.
In regards to what they like to eat, we have a couple loquat trees. Is there a resource for plants that are deterrents and plants that will attract them? Last question.
I'll try to remember them all.
You mentioned something earlier, and I had split focus about like property owners with firearms.
Yeah.
And so I was like, can they shoot a bear if their property was fired? So those were my questions.
Sure. Okay, I'll address that one first. Okay. Yes, regarding firearms. Yes, if you absolutely, as a property owner,
scares me to think that my neighbors might be doing that.
Understood, and then that's why we always say, consider your local firearm ordinances, right?
Okay.
Because yes, if you as a property owner, if you saw a bear actively taking, your property, or you felt like you or your family were in imminent danger,
then yes, you could actually legally take that bear. But we'd want that reported, of course, so that a warden could go out and just investigate, make sure, yes, this bear was taken in, self-defense of myself, my property. But again, those situations are very rare. And yes, obviously in Southern California, not necessarily the best option.
We have neighbors who call the police every time. And I'm
Yeah,
Okay.
I gotcha.
Thank God. Take a look at it, but yeah.
Yeah, and then I guess let's see, the fruit trees. Yes, loquats, unfortunately, and I know you had said yes in the past, she had to take hers out, and I'm sorry.
No, we will. I hate that.
Well, okay then. No, I know, and it's one of those things, like, I know I would never want to prevent anyone from having fruit trees, right? I certainly can't tell them, no, you cannot have a loquat tree or any kind of fruit tree, but I think it's just that understanding of, you know, if you have it, just recognize that, yeah, it's gonna attract animals, and not even just bears, but coyotes.
All over looking out the window.
Yeah.
And citrus maybe is not so attractive, right?
You know what's funny? Some bears, again, this is kind of jokingly, some of us like Mexican food, some of us like Italian. Okay. Some bears love citrus, some won't touch it. I know bears that totally go for oranges and bears that don't. Yeah, it just really depends.
Tangerine tree, and they love it.
Oh, they love it, see? Okay. I'm sorry.
So, and then
okay.
about the reproducing.
Yes, okay. So she would not be able to reproduce for a couple of years. As far as her brother, we don't know actually if it's a male or female. Honestly, I still haven't, if it's a brother. Yeah, that's a great question.
But the blue tag is a female.
Yes, blue tag is a female. Yeah, and we don't, it's possible for sure that they could interbreed, especially if they did not move out of the Verdugos, which again is a possibility. These bears could very well leave at any point. We don't know where that cub is. Can't confirm or deny if it's here or or what gender. But yeah, that's an option. Yeah, they could theoretically. Yeah. Oh wait, I'm so sorry. You had another question. I was going to go with you next, and then
I just wanted to reiterate how important protecting food or preventing the bears from getting food.
Yeah.
I go up in the High Sierra a lot.
Yeah.
And they mandated years ago that we go up there with bear cans. Mm-hmm. And that absolutely stopped contact with the bear. Kind of sad, but it stopped contact because they saw the people, they said, there's no food, I'm not going near them. Yep. Honestly, it stopped.
Yeah.
So stopping the food is important.
It is, and bear canisters are great. I have mine every time I backpack. I bring it too, no matter where I am, for that reason. Yeah, it's like you don't want to lose your food, and you don't want the bear to get it either, or any animal for that matter. Thanks for bringing that up. And for these kinds of conflicts, I think it really is just about trying to stay one step ahead, and that's why with new technology, with new materials, we can create these things now that prevent this kind of conflict, and that's really where things are going, is trying to figure out what can we do, what equipment, can we use to prevent these kinds of conflicts, and bear canisters are a great example of that. So, okay, question in the very back. Yeah, Melissa.
So it kind of dovetails into what you just said about preventing food. So I'm saying this because y'all are here and you know I've been in contact with Public Works. So I wanted to say it out so everybody knows current time, where we're at. I put an email out. You guys know that we have a plan for our black bins, our blue bins, our green bins, and we're working on getting a central. I'm talking to them about getting a central dumpster if it can be orchestrated to the city, if there's money, but this is the concept. If we have a central organic dumpster, we'll get the food source, the thing that's going to sustain the bear from eating, away from us, and that's the plan. And then on that, if we do all of those bins properly, again, hopefully removing at least that source of it, then we will move on from there. If it's not working, then we will talk to the city. I will, I'm going to do this, if we're going to follow the steps. So that's why I'm making sure that, we're listening to best practices, we're following your guidance. We all put this together. Just as assistant, I want to say, the news is here and this is becoming a story. And from my point of view, I don't want it to be sensationalized because I think for the most, just so it's known, most of us are trying to want to learn to live with the bear. And I think from my take on it, that's where we're at. So I'm just saying that out loud. I feel that that's where we're at. And I would hate for the choice to be taken away from us because something got out of hand and you have to look at it. If that happens, cool too. The world is out of hand. But having said that, this is what I'm working on. This is hit me up if I'm lagging. But that's where we're at. Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, no, thank you for that feedback, and yeah, no, I appreciate it, and I know we've talked, you know, after I'd initially gone out to the country club community, and I really am impressed with how much communication you guys have. It's really awesome just to see that everybody's trying to figure out the best scenarios, right? Trying to figure out what's best to do going forward. So thank you to the community, honestly, for doing that. So.
Just gave a card?
Yeah, I do have a card. Yes, and then yeah.
Like 4th of July, we want to have a barbecue.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, and
our neighbors wanted
certainly.
to have Father's Day barbecue, and they changed their plans because the bear was there.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. No,
what do we do?
No, certainly. I would say, you know, don't stop living your lives. You know, obviously, yeah, that's a scent attractant, but having so many people together, you know, as long as someone's just kind of staying with the barbecue and the food at all times, just to kind of keep an eye on things, you know, it'd be so difficult to say, you know, don't have a barbecue, right? Just because there's bear activity. It's just about kind of knowing that there is that level of risk, but it's going to be minimal, you know. So hopefully that kind of answers your question.
Yeah. Clean your grill.
And then clean the grill. Yeah, of course. Goes without saying, I guess, but yeah. Okay, any other, oh yeah, quick question.
I still think what this has done has changed the quality of our life up there. I know some people have not had close encounters, some of us have. The fact that we can no longer keep our windows open at night. I mean, it's been fine during the foggy weather, but we're now headed into warm weather. There was a thing on the news the other day about a bear on the 2nd floor that just opened the window, shredded the screen. And so, to me, that's not going to be wonderful. And the fact that now our neighborhood has become like a study area. With, over the course of a few years, we could have 2 more sets of cubs. I mean, the population could grow. They seem to be very happy in our neighborhood and very satisfied in the neighborhood. So, thank you for protecting the animals, but I also think people need to be protected as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I really do value that feedback. You know, this is what we want to hear. We want to hear how everyone's, you know, thinking about the bears, how it's affecting people. So I really do appreciate that. And, you know, maybe just speaking to windows real fast as well. Yeah, I did see that video out of Colorado. I would say, you know, that's going to be pretty uncommon behavior. That's really a learned behavior. So if a bear, you know, was able to receive some kind of food reward after doing something like that, that's when they're more inclined to continue trying to do that kind of thing. So it's learned versus just sort of, you know, following your nose sort of thing. You know, there are ways to protect windows too, not even necessarily just electric fencing. Things like what are known as unwelcome mats. If you're familiar with that at all.
Oh, they're scary looking.
They are a little scary looking. You know, it's essentially, you know, if there's any sort of platform.
In the middle of the night, forget they're there.
Yeah, no, and obviously, again, it's one of those deterrents that it's like, it's not going to work for everybody in every situation. But, you know, there are ways to sort of fortify as well. So I'm happy to discuss more options with you as well going forward. But I really do value that feedback, so thank you. Yeah. Any other questions, folks?
No, I looked at the pictures.
How are we doing on time?
Thank you, Jess. Absolutely. No, thank you so much.
You have a tough job.
You know, that's what